So this learning moment is about adding that SPA or single page application type of functionality to our existing MVC application. Now, just to mention, there are lots of tools out there that are designed from the get-go to work in this paradigm, right? Having a single page where you do everything and so on and so forth, right? But we can actually give the same type of user experience, as I say here, just combining techniques that we've already used before. Could be we would incorporate model pop-up, so that's not necessary. Definitely we'll be using partial views and a bit of client-side script once in a while in order to get this fully up and working. So as I said, we can just build on what we already know instead of abandoning the MVC application approach that we've come to know and love, right? Okay, now this is also very flexible. We can adapt the situation to whether we're working with a single entity, a one-to-many, even a many-to-many relationship, right? Of course, with a many-to-many, you remember, of course, we have that associative or intersection entity, right? And sometimes it only has the two foreign keys inside it to support the many-to-many between its two parents, so to speak. But in many cases, we do actually add additional properties there, and that's kind of the scenario we're going to be using today. Okay, just before we go on, I want to mention that we don't necessarily need to use the modal pop-up approach either. It actually works nicely, but if there's reasons why you want to stay away from it, then we can easily do things just right inside the view itself, right, instead of having the separate modal pop-up. Now, I've added to my initial demonstration that I had posted earlier so that we could also show this approach. And what we're doing here is essentially what is sometimes referred to as edit in place, right? Where we just take a region of the page, click a button to switch it from just being in like a details or display mode, read only, and swap out a different partial view that actually has, for example, the input controls for editing or creating, et cetera, right? Okay. All right, so we're going to get around to that too, but we're first of all, we'll focus on using the modal and getting full CRUD operation, create, update, delete in place. Now, the application I decided to use, rather than just clutter up some of our other demo apps are so full of different options, I thought I'd just start a little bit more fresh with dusting off an old app that we did in a previous term. So this was a music collection. Now, to keep it from being too complex, I stripped more than half of the entities out, right? So we're really just talking mainly here about an album. An album has a collection of songs on the album. Okay, the way we've set it up, a song must be on an album. It's not a nullable foreign key. It has to be assigned to an album. And the one-to-many also has the little bit of a complication in that there's also a genre, right? So an album has an overall genre, or default genre if you prefer, but each song will also have a lookup value for a genre. So it could be that this particular song, although it's on a pop rock album, is more of a jazz song, so we're going to set the genre for this one song to that, right? Different from the overall album, okay? So that does give us a couple things to work with, right? We actually have a one-to-many between genre and album, but we have a many-to-many between genre and album going through the song, right? And of course, there's a one-to-many from genre to the song. So it gets a little bit interesting at least. And then later on, I added a further complication by moving or having some additional properties of a song, but in a child-related entity in a one-to-one. Okay, getting back to, actually, it's probably helpful if I show you the application first of all. So here I have it up and running. I'm logged in, at least, unless I haven't timed out. Yeah, I guess I timed out, so there we go. So here we have our albums, okay, and if I go to the details on an album, I can see here songs that are on the album, right? Now, I was lazy. I admit it. I just used strings, collections of strings for first and last names from earlier work in other applications and combining them to create names for songs. But, it's not so much about the actual data here, the seeded data, as it is about how the overall flow of the application works. So we can see that in the album details, we have all these songs on there. But how do we edit them? Well, obviously, we could go to the songs controller, right? Following a typical MVC implementation, I can create new songs, right? Even assign to the album I want, the genre, the title, date recorded, etc., right? Or I can edit a given song, right? And so on and so forth. So that's all there in the normal way. But what we've done, what we've added here is that right on the album, okay, now I could have done this on details, but I decided to throw it in on edit. So if I come to Rocket Food here, that particular album, here are all the properties in edit mode. Okay, notice up in here I am on the edit view, okay, for album ID 1, okay. And I could make changes. I could change this 2001, whatever, and I could save those changes, no problem, right? But what if, okay, I've made that. What if I want to as well modify right from here without leaving this page songs? Okay, maybe I want to add a new song. We're about to go into the recording studio, or we've just finished recording it, and now I'm going to add this song. So the song, of course, we have validation here, right? We've done this kind of work before. So we're just reusing things we've got in our toolkit already, right? So I'll put a name for the song, All of Me, All of Me. And date recorded was today, okay? And it is a jazz song, okay? Now notice that the album itself is a rock. That's a genre for the overall album, but individual songs can have their own genre, so I'll create that one. And there it is, All of Me, right up there, okay? Alphabetical ordering, that's why it came to the top of the list. But if oh, you know what? It's not really jazz. I've decided that it's more of a pop song, really. So I can just change that quickly without ever leaving the page. You know what? Everyone in the studio says that was crap, okay? We aren't even going to use that song, so I'm going to delete it altogether. There we go. So we have full CRUD operations here, fully supported without ever leaving this page whatsoever, right? So that's the first thing we're going to go through and talk about. So I'm going to stop running right now. First thing I do want to kind of look at then is, let me come over here to the actual entities involved, right? So we have the album, okay? So it basically, besides some summary properties, has a name for the album, the year produced, okay, and a price. Now this is a 4-character representation of the year, right, as a string. There's a price. I'm setting a default value. And of course, we have a foreign key for genre, because this is the child in a one-to-many relationship from genre to album, right? What else do we have? Well, we have a collection of songs, because it's a parent, okay, to the songs collection, right? And that also supports a separate many-to-many between genre and album. Don't want to complicate things, but I thought I'd better explain the code that's here. So kind of leaving the genre out for a second. So we have many songs on an album, right? Well, let's see what a song looks like a little bit. Okay, again, some summary properties. We have a title for the song. We have a date recorded as a date time. Okay, we'll get back. Ignore the song detail for now. That's part of the second half of the demo. Okay, so what we have here are 2 foreign keys: the album that the song is on, and the genre for the individual song, which can be different, obviously, from the one of the album, as we've said. So finally, I must have closed it somehow or other. If I come here to genre, let's have a look at that. Okay, just to clean up the screen. So we have a name. That's pretty much it. A name for the genre. And then, of course, because it's a parent in multiple relationship, it has a collection of albums. These are the albums that have this particular genre as the overall or default genre for the album. And, of course, each song, okay, has its own genre. And so we have a collection of songs inside the genre class as well. And that's all we're going to talk about in terms of the models for now. All right. So how are we going to do this? Let me bring back my PDF file. Okay. For songs on an album. Okay. So what I did is I created a separate controller for this. Now, the truth is I could have incorporated all of this code right into the songs controller, or song, I should say, song controller itself, right? And that would have been a valid way to approach it. But it just clutters up. Our controllers, you know, they get so busy with all the different things. Because the approach is separate, and we're not going to be using all of the same arrangement of actions. Our GET requests won't be handled in the same way at all. I think it's worth actually creating a separate controller, right? Now, let me show you that controller, okay? So you could actually create this, so the album songs controller as opposed to the songs controller, right? Now, you could approach this creating an empty controller, and in fact, you're going to end up bringing the vast majority of the code over from the song controller and just modifying it. So that's one way to get this up and going, right? Okay, now let me just talk quickly about the index. I'm not really using the index here. This is really just for my pop-up modals, right? That's what this will service. So I don't need the index. So I'm just, if anybody tries to come to the index, I'm just going to redirect them back to the album index itself, right? So that's said and done. Okay. Now, in terms of the other, let me just go Control MO for a second. The other actions in here, you see we have create song and create. We have edit song and edit. Delete song and delete confirmed like normal, right? So the main difference is, and I point this out in that PDF file, okay, well, I might as well bring it back, right? So as I said, the index action just redirects back to the album index. The get actions, instead of returning a view, they're all partial view results, okay? So they will actually return a partial view that will be integrated into the page, actually into the modal in this case, right? So we'll have one for each action for our create, our update, and delete, okay? So all the get actions aren't typical. They don't return a view, they return a partial view, right? And we'll put that partial view into the same modal pop-up. We can use the same modal itself and just load different partial views into the modal to give one for edit, one for create, etc., right? Okay, so those forms are created as strongly typed partial views. Notice strongly typed as well, right? Because each of these partial views will actually have a model, which makes them strongly typed. Okay, well, let's get there a step at a time. So coming back to the controller, maybe we'll look at the create first. So here's our get. So if a get request comes in, okay, for create song, right? What we're going to do, we still need a select list in this case because we need our foreign key, our drop-down list to choose the genre. So we're going to add that in to view data here. That just gives us data for the select list. And I'm going to store as well in view data the album ID. Now, it's true, if you go to the songs controller, you can change everything about a song, even move it from one album to another. But I decided for this demo, no, I'm working with the actual songs on an album. So I'm focused on the album. So I'm not going to allow the user to try and change that, okay? So I'm throwing that into view data as well. What is the album ID? All right. And then we just bring up a create song partial view. So what does that look like? Well, coming down to views, okay, I come to my album songs, and here's my create song partial view. So it is pretty much like, and you could get this up in one of a few different ways. The code for it is pretty much a copy of the code for the create song view itself, okay? We have our model at the top, so it's strongly typed partial view, right, which we were providing the song to it as we actually bring it up, okay? Or we can. I guess we're not, because we don't need one when we're just creating, right? In edit we will, but that's a separate partial view. So we have our inputs for title, date recorded, genre. Notice we don't have an input here. There's no drop-down list for the album, because as we said, we're predefining that this is for this album, because that's what we're focused on is the album, and we're not going to change it. So we're just sticking it away here in a hidden input instead of having a select list, right? Now, this is similar to the other modal work we've done before. My submit button here, I have an ID. That ID is there so that I can, in client-side JavaScript, I can grab the click event of this, prevent default, because I really don't want this form sending its data in the normal way, right? I'm going to prevent that default, and I'm going to use an AJAX request to bundle up this data, similar to what we've done with our, add a new option in a drop-down list on the fly approach, right? We'll bundle up all the data on this form. It could be a much larger, more complex form as well, and send it off with an AJAX request back to our album songs controller. So that comes back in here. Notice I've included these libraries, right, directly into this view so that we have the client-side jQuery validation, so if something is required and so on and so forth. Okay, so coming back here. Now we're done with the get, so now we come in here to the post. Now this will be, the data will come in, as we said, from an AJAX request, right? But we can still follow the normal approach. Okay, we'll bind the key properties here, and of course the album ID is just stored in that hidden input. But we have our title, date recorded, and the genre that the user has set, right? And we save it in the usual way. But notice this, because it's a totally separate controller, I don't have to worry about the normal flow of control with an MVC controller. I can just say, hey, we're good. We return okay. Everything worked fine. Yeah, be eerie or whatever that phrase. It's all good, man. Okay, we're good. Okay, if there is a database DB update exception, right, perhaps because we did add a unique constraint here, we can't have duplicate song titles on the same album, okay, then that will be a DB update exception, so we'll add that in here to our model errors and so on, right? So then we return a bad request. Now, what I'm going to do is if there's any additional validation messages that didn't get handled already with our client-side validation, okay, or something that comes from the database, then what we're going to do is that's all in our model state, and we're going to return an error message. And we're going to use the same approach that we did earlier on, and that is to bundle up all these messages as one big long string, delimit them with a pipe character so that we can actually loop through that string, separate it out, and then show each as a list item in an unordered list on the page. And that's how we're going to actually get that error feedback message up to the client. So how are we going to do that? Well, because I'm going to use this for multiple controllers and everything, I went to my utilities. And I added a little utility here, build error message utility, right? So called build messages, and it has, so far I've just added error message. It returns a static string. We pass in model state, okay? Do a little bit of link query, and we've done this before. Pull out all the model errors and just loop through them all, adding them to the message with a pipe character in between, and that's what we return. Okay, that's good. So that's what we do there. And then the edit process, very much the same. A GET request comes in for an edit, okay? So we have to prepare a couple things. First we go and we get the actual song that we're editing, right? So that we can actually populate the partial view that's going to be in the modal with the data for the selected song. Of course, we need our select list as well. So we return the partial view. Now this time, not only are we naming which partial view to return, we're passing in a model object, right? We're passing in the song that we retrieved here based on the ID that we passed in. That's the one song. So our edit song, partial view, looks pretty much like a regular edit view for a song. Again, though, we don't offer the chance to change the album. That's just tucked away here in a hidden input. Notice we do have row version as well, right? Because there is concurrency control on here at the same time, right? So if we violate that, then that message can appear at the top of the page as well, right? Again, I kind of didn't take time to point this out, but you'll find the exact same line of code in the create song. Here is that what I'm calling our validation summary. Basically, it's an unordered list, okay, that will actually populate with code in our JavaScript with all of the error messages that come back. All right, inputs for title, date recorded, our select list for genre, and away we go. Again, submit song form. Look at that. Exactly the same ID on the create and the edit, okay? So that way I can just, in my JavaScript, grab the click event of any button that says my ID is submit song form, and I can handle it in my client-side script, prevent default, and do what I want to do. Again, just including the jQuery validation script libraries here, right into the modal itself. Okay, moving right along. Here's our delete. No surprises. We get the song. This is, again, a partial view result that we return. We return our delete song partial view, okay, with the song in place, right? Even though we don't really show very much of the song, that's okay. So our delete song partial view is right here. It's very, very simple. It does have our delete action defined in the form, etc. And notice again the ID button, the submit button has the same ID, submit song form, right? Are you sure we want to delete? We are using the summary, right, to give that up there. And of course, we have the ID hidden away as well. And that's it. Now, the index is only here for safety because we aren't really ever going to hit it or see it. Actually, I could delete it because I know I'm going to always, if an index request comes in for the index, I can just redirect them back to the album index. So the truth is I could delete that. Why don't I? There we go. Proof that I'm right. I really don't need it. Okay. There we are. So those are the main actions inside of our album song controller, right? So they just return these partial views. So how do we get them up in the page itself? Well, let me close up a few of these things. Actually, let me close everything. Okay. All right. Well, I'll bring back my PDF file here. Okay. So those forms, okay, are all strongly typed partial views, right? And they have post actions to carry out the CRUD operations. Okay, so we'll get to that in a moment. So the three partial views are in the album songs view controller, and now they're ready to use. How are we going to use them? Well, for albums, we're going to add yet another partial view and a partial view result action, okay, to return the song list. right? So let's look at that now. So we are talking now about the actual albums controller, right? And coming down to the album views, okay? We see two partial views here, right? So one is the actual modal that we reuse, okay? So this partial view is for the modal itself. And notice that our modal body has an ID, form, song body, okay? And this is where we're going to replace the content of this div with each of those partial views we were just looking at, our create, our edit, and delete. They will be put in place here by our client-side script depending on what is called for. And that's good. Now, also on the actual edit page, we had that list showing the list of songs. So this code is there to just refresh that list, right? So when we've added, updated, or deleted a song, we'll just go and we'll get a fresh copy of this partial view, okay, with all of its data, just showing the summary, and then we have buttons here. Now notice that the buttons all have a class. We have a common class we're using for a series of buttons, these two, as well as the one actually on the edit view. So we have to bring up that as well. We're going to need to see this, right? So notice this. We have our partial up here for the modal itself. So that's already ready to go. It's just not displayed yet, right? And what else do we have in here? When we come down, the usual things, okay, for editing the name, year, produced, price, etc., right? And here is our song list. So, I could actually dynamically pull it, but, since it's just there, I might as well, the first time the page appears, notice here's an ID for this particular class containing this table listing all of the songs. So this code is identical to what's inside the actual song list partial view, right? So what I'm going to do is whenever I want to refresh it in my JavaScript code, I just call for a new, refresh, calling the partial view result that returns my song list and replacing the content of this div with the updated version of my song list. Okay, so that's what's in here. So our modal just is a body to hold, the different create, edit, and delete partial views, right? The song list is when we want to replace the one shown on the edit page, which is essentially right here. All right, so all the other work involved in this magic comes from our client-side script. So that is all here at the bottom of edit. So this is, again, the kind of thing we've done before. Oh, I should explain. You might see this and think, well, what is that about? Well, it's nothing to do with this demo, okay? That is there. Sometimes we decide that, well, people should be allowed to edit a record, but only if they created it, depending on their role in the identity system, right? So that's an easy way for me to actually, disable a button, right? So if this person shouldn't be allowed to edit and so on. Of course, the real protection, as you know, happens in the controller itself, but, why tempt them? So we can just disable a button if it's not something they would be allowed to do. Anyway, that's why that's there. You can go find that code in the controller. All right, let's get back to our focus. Our focus here is on the JavaScript then. So first of all, any button that has modal link. Oh, I meant to show you that, right? Up here, I probably should have it down so we can see it more easily. Right above, the div where we show this song list, I also have my create button here, right? So just set up some styling here. The name is create form. So it shows the modal, right? So it brings up our actual modal dialog box, as well as, of course, our edit and delete buttons inside the song list do as well. They all bring up the modal, right? And then we'll look at how those and these all have the same common modal link, right in the actual class, So down here, what we're doing is, hey, if we click on a button that has that class, modal link, right, then what we're going to do? Well, we're going to grab the action, action form, right, from the name. Okay, so you see the name in each of these is the name of edit form, delete form, or create form, right? So those are what we're going to grab as the action form. We also need to know the ID of the song. Now, if it's a create, we don't need it because we're just creating a new one. But for edit and delete, we do. We just lie up here again. We see we're adding a tag. Tag is just a attribute inside of a link or any other HTML element that we can just stick some extra information. So in each of these cases, we're putting the primary key of the actual album itself, right? Okay. And then, sorry, not the album, the song, right? Now the tag is empty here for create. Okay. So that gives us our song ID comes from the tag. Then I'm calling this my own method here, refresh modal, okay? I have the action form, which will be either create, edit, or delete form, and my song ID. So I come up here. I'm going to call my refresh modal, okay? So basically, this is inside the song modal, right? This is the ID of the div where I want to put my different partial views. Form, song, body, right? So coming back to, back to the edit here. What I'm doing is I'm going to load into form, song, body. If it's a create form, I'm going to go to my album songs controller, the create song. I have to pass the genre and the album. Those are parameters I need, but those okay. I have them readily available, and I can build that URL. And this code then will actually go and get the create form, okay, with a predefined genre. The one is coming from the default for the album, and of course the album ID as well, and that gives you my create. For edit, exactly the same thing. The same div inside my modal, I'll populate with the partial view coming from album songs, edit song, passing the song ID as the parameter. Same thing for delete. And that's how I get the different ones up and on the screen. Okay, so what happens then? Well, I finish, right? I finish editing whatever, and I click. We have that common submit song form ID. I pointed out earlier that that was in each and every one. I shouldn't have closed them, I guess. If I come back here to these three, right? Notice that it's the same ID in each and every one, whether it's delete, right, edit, etc. The same ID for the, quote, submit button. So that's what I do here. As I grab the click event of any of those, whichever partial view is currently loaded in my modal will be the one that gives me the event, right? But I don't care. All of my prevent default this time because I don't want them actually submitting. They're submit buttons, right? I grab, okay, the form itself because they also have a common name, each and every one of these, right? The actual form is called the song form in each one. That allows me to then just grab the actual form. I can do a client-side validation check, right? So if it didn't happen already, I do it right then and there. And if it's valid, notice if it's not, we're done. We're out of there. Okay, it'll show the messages because we have the jQuery libraries already downloaded for client-side validation. But if it is valid, then what we do is we prepare an AJAX request. It'll be a post, okay? The action itself will get from the individual form, right? So for example, for edit, okay, the action comes from here. For delete, it comes from the form's action as well, and same with create, right? So that gets us our action, and that's part of the URL, okay? Or that is the URL for the AJAX request. Then we serialize all the data from the form, right? And we send it off. So when it comes back, okay, if we have success, then here is where the song modal, I hide, right? So I just hide the modal, and that's it. We're done, okay? Whether it was a create, edit, delete, doesn't matter. We just hide the modal following success. Don't worry, we'll get to the refresh in a minute. What if there's an error, though? So our AJAX request comes back, and it didn't have success, okay? Well, here's where, and this code is right from our earlier work, right? We can do, first of all, some checks on the status, okay? So if it was a 401 error, because they weren't logged in. If it's a 403, they aren't authorized for this individual action, right? Otherwise, okay, we're going to actually split the error message, okay, based on our delimiter, okay, and that slice, the -1 means we remove the last one, basically the last delimiter, and anything behind it, right? Okay, so then if we actually have something to report, okay, we've done this code before. If we can't find any error message, then we just say unable to complete operation, right? Otherwise, we go through our error list, parse them all out, and notice what we're doing. We're appending child list items, okay, to our unordered list at the top of the actual page. We have one on the top of each of these. We're talking about this div right here. this error list. So we're adding list items to it, and that gives us a chance to display those errors. Well, that's almost everything. So just remember here, if we do have success, right, then all we do is we hide the modal. So that's a perfect opportunity. So if our modal, okay, is hidden whenever we hide it, then I'm going to go and refresh my partial view, my song list. So that comes from album, song list, passing in the ID, and that will just get us a refreshed list of all the songs. Whew, and that's it. So that gives us our full CRUD functionality, right? Create, update, delete, without ever leaving the album edit page. Okay, so once more, I'll just log in here. Quickly show you that again. Album, if I pick an album, music from away, I'll edit that album. You know what? We've decided to get rid of this song altogether. That one's deleted, but we're going to add a different song. I'm going to call it My Song. I actually recorded it last Monday, and it is a techno song. That's my attempt at techno. Okay, and there it is right there. You know what? My bandmates, they don't think it's really techno. It's more of a rock song, okay? My techno just isn't very good. So you can see we can add it, edit it, and delete it, and away we go. But I'm not going to delete it just yet. Let me just point out I could make other changes. Because of my great song, I'm going to sell this for $29.99 instead. And of course, we have all the validation here, right? So if I take that out, right, and tab away, I'll eventually get my validation there as well. Cannot leave that blank. So 224. There we go. So I can save that as well, right? Music from away. I can go to details. And of course, there's my song right there. So just to summarize the first part of this demo then. So in the end, right, we got this fully working, this CRUD operation. It involved 5 partial views, 4 partial view result actions, and 3 JavaScript functions and a partridge in a pear. Oh, no, sorry. Got lost in thought there. Okay, so anyway, hopefully you'll find this documentation helpful. Now, I didn't write up anything for the next part, but we will walk through the second part of our demo together.